This session is entitled Counting Homelessness Across Contexts, and we are fortunate to have three presenters who will describe projects that they're doing that are outside of the United States. And I'm going to introduce each of them now, and then they will come up one at a time to make their presentations for about 16 minutes. We'll leave a couple minutes for clarification questions right after that, and then after all three presentations are done, we'll have 15 minutes of open Q&A, and we'll do those from the table. The presentations we'll have over here. My name is Dennis Colhane. I'm from the University of Pennsylvania, and I'm just the moderator. Our first presenter today is Isabel Calle from Chile. She is the Executive Director of Cooperación Nuestra Casa. I don't even speak Spanish, okay? Has been working for 15 years to overcome the social exclusion experienced by homeless children and adults. She is the leader of the Red Calle movement, which brings together NGOs working in homelessness to have a common voice and influence public policies at the state level. And she is part of the founding team at Calle Link, which seeks to help overcome poverty and improve the lives of those in the most vulnerable positions. So thank you for joining us. Our second presenter will be Frank Spinwin. Spinwin? I never get right. No, for over 10 years, and he is the director of FIANSA, which is a French acronym for European Federation of National Organizations Working with the Homeless. FIANSA is the only European NGO that's exclusively working on the issues of homelessness and housing exclusion. He was the director of the European Platform of Associations for Older People before his current position. He sits on the board of the Housing First Europe Hub, the European Public Health Alliance, the European Anti-Poverty Network, and Social Services Europe. He's a member of the advisory group of the World Habitat Award and of the board of the Venture Philanthropy Fund of the King Bedouin Foundation in Belgium. And Beth Rubenstein is from the United States. She's a senior research associate with the CPC Learning Network at Columbia University's Malman School of Public Health. She co-led the implementation of a study to estimate the number of children experiencing homelessness in 7 cities in Cambodia. She has experience with health and human rights, including prevention of international child trafficking, health systems equity in Ghana and Rwanda, and HIV treatment access activism in South Africa, and was a Peace Corps volunteer in Madagascar, focusing on health and nutrition at the community level. She has a Master's of Public Health degree and a Master's of Business Administration from Johns Hopkins, and is currently a PhD candidate at Columbia University's Department of Epidemiology. So we have a wonderful group of presenters. Thank you all for being here, and I'll hand it over to Isabel.
Well, hi everyone. I will do my presentation in English, but I'm a Spanish speaker, so I'm sorry about my vocabulary, but I will do my best, and also the translators. So I will talk about the Chilean experience, about measurement and counting homeless people. We have 2 previous experiences. Then I will talk about the national census that made the country this year, and some results of the neighbor that I was in charge, so it's the only numbers that already we have. So to put in context, I feel that it's important to know what Chile means and understand about homeless. I will read it because of the people who has the translator. It's people who live in public or private places without any structure that can be characterized as housing. Although this is insecure, are excluded from this group those who live in campsites. And also people who are lack and fixed regular and adequate overnight accommodation, but find a nocturnal and temporary, paid or free residence in place run by public or private institutions. Belong to this group those who stay in homes and hospices, whatever supportive or commercial. And also for the IGH framework, our country is from 1A until 2B. So it's more than a concept of a roof less. Our Red Calle, our network organization in Chile, feel that we need more about networks that happen with homeless people, but this is our reality, so this is where we are. So we have two previous experiences. We start in 2005, having our first census of, it more than a census, it was a cadastre. It was built from the social society, civil society, and we do it with the government. It was, in 2005, was also for one night. We have like a sample of 100 of communities. We found 7,254 people, and that recapitulation was only in one night. Almost 5,000 of volunteers across the country. The government made, after that, a publication, a book of that, and it was financial by the Development Ministry of the government. That was for the instruments. We have like general surveys, and also after that we make like a deep study about life stories. The time of the process was 6 months, and it was on July of 2005, and it didn't force for some law. All our cadastres are in winter time. We are in the other side of the land, so now we are in winter time. And in 2011 was a different strategy. We were working 6 days in 300 of communities. We found 12,255 people, and we have a lot of troubles with the double counting because of these too many nights, too many days doing the cadastre. So also we have a public, the public financial, but the book that we have after that, 2 years ago I was presenting about that, it was made by with a university. It was so much interesting that cadastre, because it was university, public, like the government and also the social society working together. That was 20 months, the time of the process. It was made in August. It was also the first winter plan that the government paid for have shelters during the winter, so it was easy to find more people. And also didn't force a law. We don't have, we just have like we have a public policy, but it's growing up. It's just a few years, and it's basically for the winter plan to preserve the life of people, of homeless people, and also a few, not too much, transitional housing for people experience homelessness. So this year we have like an historic, an historic national census for us. In Chile we made a census every 10 years. We have, the last census was just 3 years ago, no, 4 years ago, but it was kind of a mess, so that's why we have to make it again, not in 10 years, so in 4. And it's, well, the census is organized by the National Institute of Statistics of Chile. It's a census of population and also about housing. It's just one day all over the country. And also it's important to say that every year in Chile we have the CACEN survey, that is the official social economic measurement that made the country. So that made the official data for the that made the sample for the census. So this, from this year, we have homeless people in the census. So we will have data every year with this survey. Our special bonus that were included this year in the census was homeless people, because the other years only was the census in houses, so people in the street were not counted. Then also institutionalized people who are living in care centers, children, so also adults, and also people who is private of liberty. So in the census in Chile, we were having two national surveys. One was the regular surveys for like resident houses, and we have also other one for collective houses. And here we have like hospitals, like emergency rooms, train and bus stations, also a metro station, hotels, hostels, and I make a mistake there because airports were something different, like transit people, but also were counted. So also, so we have these two different questions. The first one that is for regular houses. They are also asking about material of the house. This first year that homeless people are in the census, we are in the collective houses. So the country is divided in regions and also in municipalities. So every municipality is taking care about the territory that they have to do the census, to make better public policies, subsides, to make the better management of the money, of the distribution. So some of the things that happen sometimes when you work with when you work with the public spaces is that the government called me just 1 month before the census. So we were like, wow, what we will do? But we are kind of happy because it was a fair experience and we could manage. So in 2006, they made a pre-census, but we didn't know. So they made some to check the street points. Of course, what happened with homeless people, the mobility is important. So the points were none in April in this year. So we make the division when we made division with the civil society. That's one month before they were like, oh, what we do? So we divide. I can show. This is the commune that I was in charge. So we divide. It was so good that Community Solutions. So we were working about the counting with them, so I could use that learnings here. So we divided the common in where were different foundations for the civil society working on. So it was so much easy because we knew the people, we knew the points, and we could manage better. I will come back. So we have also volunteers for this. Well, the census, it's paid by the government. So also our volunteers were paid for the first time because all the cadastre was for free. Well, the pay is less than $20, but it's a pay. So the volunteer has a special training, different for the training of all of the other part of the country, just for homeless people. And one of the requirements was that you have experience with homeless people. So that was very good. And the key of success was the civil society, the NGOs, the foundations were working already in the communities. And also that we have a flexible schedule because they said the census starts at 12 o'clock from April 19 and will end at the end of the day, but they make flexible for us because we have concentrate of people in different hours. So my organization started and we started at 8 o'clock the day before, and that was not a problem. So that's the map. We have, this is Santiago, this is the commune of Santiago, it's not the whole city. And in the part of the top is the neighborhood that my organization, Nuestra Casa, is working, so we did it there. Well, the estimate of the municipality was like 200 of people. well, we found 500. So one of the things that we have is that this is the survey that we have, and on the top there is a number. So all of the country use the same number for homeless people. So then we will know exactly number for all the country. So this survey is the collective houses that has 14 questions. 11 of those questions are for men and women, and it has to be about gender, age, education, job, and mobility. Just not more, just that. And then the last 3 questions is only for women older of 15 years. That it has to be, there are questions more about childhood. So what happened in our neighborhood? In our neighborhood we found 486 homeless people. We found 246 on streets and 2,040 in transitional housing. Our experience was doing all of that with 25 volunteers. For me was very nice because 12 of them were homeless people, that they are living in our transitional housing, that they were volunteers, so they were making the surveys for their partners. We have 10 teams, 1 bike team, and we made a very good coordinated with the police, but the police were agreed to not be on the street that days because homeless people, they don't have very good relation, many of them, with the police. But with the civic safety, they will help us too much. So he was the first sense of all the country. Under the bridge we have, here are others team. So this is kind of our results. In Chile we said that the 85% of homeless are men and just the 15 are women, but our community now is different. The 9% was women and 91 was men. The average age of the women are 34 and men 45. The 30% of women have a primary education and men's the 45. Women's secondary education the 20% and men's 40. And university education just men 3% of them. So 80% of women are working, and also men, 85%. All of them, in both, like the 95% are having independent works, and not so fair works. Because the people they have not a roof to stay. And now that is very important for us. The migrants the 10% of the men are migrants, and we didn't find any woman migrant in our area. And also the 90% of them, they were living in our area. And the other number is where they were living in the census before. So we have teams on bikes. So it was so easy to move in the city, and I have just my conclusions. Well, the importance always is to work together, the civil society, government, municipalities. We hope that next year we have more time than 1 month to do it, but we are happy. The thing about volunteers with experience in homelessness, and also we think that was very successful, and it was very important for them and for us. Look the migrant as a new profile. We have in our different programs, we have between the 10 and the 20% are migrants now. And also all through that, now we have more service around the communes. In the city, there is a strong concentration of homeless people in the center of the city, or this neighborhood that is patrimonial. The municipality said that there are only 1,000 of homeless people in the commune, but we have 500 just in our neighborhood, so the numbers are not so low. And also to be included in the census law ensures that as every year about homeless people that we are very successful because of that. So
Thank you very much. Just a couple of minutes for questions and clarification, and I have one. So this being included every year, but the census is only every 10 years.
yeah, but I was talking about this CACEN social economic survey that the country make every year. That's why we will have data every year.
Excellent. Other questions, clarification?
One by one.
But now,
Not everybody in the time.
people are getting paid though now, right? So, not just
Yeah, but it's less than $20, but it's help. Yeah, it's
okay.
Volker.
Other questions? Yes, Volker.
Microphone because of the translation.
Yes.
I can do it.
You need the microphone as well.
Sorry.
Thank you. Just a question on, do you have already outcomes, national outcomes, or is that too early?
It's too early. You have the primus. Nobody knows the numbers. And also, I hope that is confidentiality here, because I took the numbers of my neighbor, but the government is processing.
Because we had this debate at the previous session about census trying to include homeless people, but not being able to produce isolated numbers for the homeless. They would, for example, in my own country, Germany, they would publish numbers of people living in institutions and the homeless in one bunch, so you would not have anything out of it, because you would not have the number of homeless people as such, but you have a larger group of people in prison, as you showed, people in prison, people in homes for the elderly, and the homeless.
Yeah, we fight a lot because of that. I were like going to the war, and we could make like one number just for homeless people. But we know that maybe there were some, I don't know, in Chile happened that there are a lot of homeless people outside the emergency rooms in the hospitals. So of course there will be people that they are waiting for the attention in the hospital, that maybe they are in our number. So.
Oh, any others? Okay, good. So we will move on. We'll have our question and answers. Oh, there was?
Yes. There are two.
I didn't see it. Oh, okay. Remember, questions of clarification, please, because we'll get to more substantive discussion later.
Juan Martín.
Hola, gracias. Hablaré en español. ¿Me ayudas con la traducción? Sí, tres preguntas. Si nos puedes decir un costo aproximado del censo, lo que en términos de dólares o cuánto cuesta, me refiero a la inversión del Estado. Segundo, la diferencia de edad en términos de niños más pequeños o niñas más pequeñas, hasta 15, y no sé si es mucho, pero ¿qué tanto estos datos ayudan a tomar decisiones en la política pública para el Estado?
So he was asking about first how much cost the census. It's $800. But a few years ago, about $8,000. No, $800,000. Sorry, dollars. Just our cadastre of street homeless. I really don't know how much. Maybe 10 more times. Or my Karina Soto, my assistant. And then Juan Martín was asking about if we have numbers of children. Now, in my neighborhood, it was just 5. We found just 5 children. So it's not too much.
Okay. We have very little time, but we don't
Yeah.
give other people.
Question. I'm Sanjay from New Delhi, working with the homeless population. My question is like, how do you manage your fight or your anticipation with the government as well? Because this enumeration of homeless people, especially in census, is primarily depend on the methodology adopted by the government people. You know, you and me and other civil society organization cannot surpass the government methodology and legitimacy as well. So like in New Delhi or in India, in fact, when we were witness to enumerate homeless population in 2001 and 2011, both the time. So the Department of Census has a different kind of notion, different kind of definition in terms of counting homeless population on the streets, in the grounds, in the shelters, and we have others. So like we have counted in the same years, so we counted each and everybody head counts. So we found nearly 54,000 homeless people sleeping on the streets and different areas, but the government has found only 24,000. So I mean...
Yeah, it's always happened to us also that the municipality was in charge, but they just bring 4 workers for the census, and they did just 1 street.
Thank you.
So I was asked to, does it work?
Yes.
Yep. Good afternoon. I was asked to say a few words about a recent initiative from Eurostat, the European Statistical Institute of the European Union, in relation to homelessness. But I would like to first give you a little bit of background about data collection in the European Union. I'm not going to provide any kind of detail about what happens in 28 countries, impossible in the time available, but try to give you a sense of what is happening in Europe. Maybe first to say that at the national level, at the level of the member states, in the 28 member states of the European Union, most of the member states will not have official data on homelessness. I think it's something to remember. There is a number of countries, and I just give a few examples there, that organize large regular surveys every 5 years, every 10 years, in countries like France, Spain, and Italy, for instance. They're quite detailed surveys, quite expensive, and they happen regularly, like I said. And then you have a number of countries that are really running ahead of all the others when it comes to data collection, have a combination of sources, do different studies, local level, national level, etc. Probably Volker said earlier on that Finland was the best example. Maybe I think Denmark can rival with Finland in terms of data collection. The problem with all these data that are collected at national level, they're not comparable at EU level, so you cannot just bring them all together and then say how many people are homeless at EU level. That's at state level. At local level, there is a lot. In all countries, you will have some kind of data collection at local level, usually surveys, but the quality is very different from city to city. At EU level, there is absolutely nothing up till now. And that poses, of course, huge ethical problems because it means that homeless people constantly are ignored in the policy that is developed at EU level because there is no data. There is no data in principle don't exist in policy making terms. Of course, there is a link between data and policy, and what I'm going to say is probably totally superficial, but I'm struggling already in the last 15 years as director of FIANZA to find out what makes some countries do better on homelessness than other countries. And you would think that issues like equality would relate to the level of homelessness, or the size of the social housing sector would relate to homelessness. And I'm sure that that's the case, but it's very difficult to make that case when you look at the data. But if you look at the countries that have very performant data collection systems and how the policy is developed, I think there seems to be quite a strong link. What is interesting to note is that there is a number of sorts of data that are very informative for policy making that are missing in many countries at European level. One of them is the time that people are homeless. This idea of having chronic, episodical and transitional homelessness, there's very few countries that have that kind of data. And it's strange because it's so important for policy making terms. And also the link between the time you're homeless and the complexity of your needs, which is a very important question, because the assumption is that if you're chronic homeless, you have more complex needs, but is that always the case? There is indications that it might not always be the case. And then the other set of data that are missing in many European countries is the sort of data about the reasons that explain why people move into homelessness and move out of homelessness. Now, what is available at EU level in terms of data? I have no time to go into much detail, but there's one big survey. It's called EU-SILC, it's the European Union Survey on Income and Living Conditions. And it's a big household survey. It's about 10,000 individuals per country. So you could say big or small, but it's relatively big and complicated survey. They don't collect any data on homelessness up till now, but quite a lot of data on housing exclusion, housing cost overburden, housing quality, these kind of things. That's all available, but nothing on homelessness. So you have to know that most of the social policy of the European Union is based on EU civic. So if homelessness is not there, homelessness tends to be forgotten in policy-making terms. Then there is an agency called European Foundation for Working and Living Conditions, another EU agency. And they do a quality of life survey with more in-depth data on housing, but smaller samples. But again, homelessness is out, so it would be housing exclusion, housing cost overburden, these kind of things. Then there is an institute called Eurobarometer. They do population, how to call it, public opinion surveys. I hope it's English. Also small samples, about 1,000 people per country. And there is interesting, there's an interesting Eurobarometer survey that dates back from 2010 that asks questions about fear of homelessness. What do you think is the size of the problem of homelessness in your area? And you could see it's a proxy of the size of the problem, but I'll show you in a minute that it's not necessarily the case. Then there's the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, which is not a European organization, it's more like the US, Canada are part of it. They have done a daring exercise recently in the framework of a housing database where they ranked countries according to their homeless numbers, which is problematic, I think, but at least they published it. And then there is, and Volker asked a question about it, we also have the census, the last one was in 2011. Homelessness had to be included. The homeless population had to be included, captured, but not all countries were separating the data for homelessness. So they were inside, but you could not have the actual number necessarily. This is just to give you an idea of to what ridiculous results it leads the census. Of course, the zeros are the countries that have not have decided not to identify homeless people separately. So they're included, but you cannot extract them separately. So it's not that Germany has 0 homeless people. We know they have more, but it's... but even if you look at the countries that did an effort to capture homeless people separately, like I've been in Malta a few times, I've personally seen more than 2 homeless people there, so that's definitely but UK is also an interesting example, 240 people. It said that there is little U attached to it, which means uncertain or probably not correct. But you see, it leads to a ranking that is difficult to believe, that is just not true. This is what the OECD did, but they just pulled together the data from countries that the government representatives gave to them, where you see that the Czech Republic is the worst of all countries in the OECD in terms of a number of homeless people as part of the population, and Japan has 0.0. Also, that's like an exercise. You see, like what's the point of doing that? And OECD is a serious organization, so it's strange that they publish these kind of things. This is from Eurobarometer. You can probably not see it, but the question is, do you think there is homeless people in your area? And is it a lot, not so much, or little? And there you see that especially Eastern European countries think that there is a lot of homeless people. And that's strange because we know from our research that homelessness, at least visible homelessness, or the homeless in shelter and on the street is slightly less present than in other countries. So it's not necessarily an objective. And this is how, do you fear that you will be homeless one day? Again, it's Eastern European countries that are most afraid to become homeless. So you could think it's maybe a proxy of the size of the homeless problem, but maybe not. Now the question is, that I get asked constantly, is how many homeless people are there in the European Union? And we don't know, like honestly we don't know, but if you Google European Union homelessness number, you will find 4 million. And I thought it was important to say where the 4 million comes from. So the argument is that there would be 4 million people that experience homelessness over the period of a year. It's totally academically not robust, this estimation. What has happened is that somebody, I'm not going to say who it was, but somebody looked at the official data that exists in a number of countries on the people sleeping rough and in homeless shelters. That's in half of the EU member states. Then extrapolated that number on the basis of the population. Maybe good to know that Germany, which is the biggest country in the European Union, doesn't have any official data on homelessness, so it was extrapolated for Germany. And that came to 400,000 people, more or less a year. And then the fact that 10 was just used to make the difference between point-in-time data and the experience of homelessness at the time of a year. We think the first is probably an underestimate, the second is an overestimate. But my gut feeling says that 4 million is probably not far off the truth, but there is no robust basis for that. Very quickly about trends, because a number is difficult to say, but we know about trends. It's growing, and that's interesting in the US context. It's growing in all EU member states except Finland, where it consistently goes down. And it's growing very rapidly in a number of countries. Greece is an obvious example, but also Ireland, UK, or parts of the UK is growing very fast. And this parts of the homeless population are growing faster than others. Young people, families, that's what we see growing most fastly. In terms of causes, what we see is that people increasingly become homeless because of changes in the social protection, social welfare system. The austerity measures have impacted homelessness, as well as dysfunctional housing markets, which is also related to austerity, of course. You don't see it entirely, or you see it entirely, but I don't see it on my screen, not entirely. This is just an idea, it's absolutely not comparable, it's different time frames, etc. But it gives an idea of how serious the homeless crisis is in Europe. It's something that comes from Fianza itself, that is based on data provided by our member organizations. Now, 2 words about this Eurostat initiative related to homelessness. I said earlier on that Eurostat is not doing anything, but they plan to do something. They have designed a specific module to integrate in the EU Silk, the big survey that I was talking about earlier on. And that model will be applicable in 2018. It's a big specific module. It means that it will not be repeated every year, maybe every 10 years, maybe just once. It's a model on material deprivation, well-being, and housing difficulties that wants to add information to what is collected every year. And what they integrated in that module is questions on past experience of homelessness. And why do they do that? It's probably because it's the only realistic way to get some comparable data on homelessness. You have to know that it's a voluntary, the questions on homelessness are voluntary, so member states, the statistical institutes in the member states can choose to take it on or not in 2018. And we know that national statistical institutes are not always so keen to do more for the European Union, so it remains to be seen what will be the outcome, how the take-up will be. But it might be integrated obligatory in a new regulation, new law, European law on social service post-2020. So maybe before I retire there will be some data on homelessness at the European Union level. So these are the questions. I'm not going into much detail, but the question, they decided to look to ask for lifetime experience of homelessness. Have you been homeless in your life? And then they don't ask have you been homeless, they ask have you experienced housing exclusion, and then they list the categories there. So it's quite broad definition of homelessness. They ask about the duration of your last experience of homelessness. Then they ask about, or they will ask about the main reasons, again with a drop-down menu. And then the possibility to say other reasons. And then the reasons for exiting homelessness. So you see there, I'm not going into detail, you can say it's not complete, or it's too complete, or it's too long, but that's what's in the law. It's a voluntary series of questions, and we hope that most member states will take it on. Now that's very nice. It's the first time that the European Union, Eurostat, is taking homelessness seriously, but like I said, voluntary. There remains a bit of unclarity about the definitions still. It was a real battle to get the detail there, but Eurostat was not always that helpful. There is a sample size, only 10,000 individuals per state. Smaller states a little bit less, bigger states a little bit more. Very often, and the question is whether it's too small to capture statistically relevant information. That's what we'll have to see. And then, of course, the bigger question, and I'm not badly placed to answer that question, is whether past experience of homelessness is a proxy of current levels of homelessness. But the advantage, if it works, is that we would have some kind of comparability of the scope of the problem between countries, which we have absolutely not at the moment. So that's it for me.
I could do the...
Oh, excellent. Thank you very much. So clarification questions only, not discussion questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much for a very interesting presentation. Quick question.
It's all right.
No, more near the...
Okay, just a very quick question. Yeah? Did you look at immigration across the EU? Because especially with the question about previous experience of homelessness, were you looking at, was that looked at before?
But it depends what you understand by migration. It's very clear that people that have residence permit and are in the country, they are included, but the big problem of undocumented migration, I mean, people that are failed asylum seekers that are overstaying, or people that come into the country undocumented and don't try to get documents, they're out. Obviously.
Okay. Excellent. Well, we'll have more time for general discussion after our concluding last presentation. Beth Rubenstein talking about Cambodia. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, so I am going to be talking about a study that we did in Cambodia to determine the number and basic characteristics of homeless children in 7 cities. And then I'm going to briefly discuss the implications for practice. So everyone in this room is well aware that lack of data has been one of the major barriers to homeless work. I think this data gap is particularly stark in the international arena. Homeless children are totally excluded from most of the major data sources that guide international development benchmarks, like the Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals. This is because most of the global development data comes from household surveys. So we're missing homeless children, we're missing children in residential care institutions or orphanages, we're missing migrant laborers. And the scale of this problem is pretty large. One estimate said that even though the absolute numbers of children in these situations might not be huge, because all of these children are living in extreme poverty, we're underestimating the proportion of, or the children that live in extreme poverty. We're underestimating the lowest wealth quintile by up to 25%, which leaves us with very, very skewed portrait of development progress. So the reason this specific research project was done in Cambodia is because Cambodia was selected as the first demonstration country for a multi-year USAID funded initiative called Family Care First. And the goal of Family Care First is to measurably increase the number of children living in supportive family environments. The 2 populations that were targeted in Cambodia as having the greatest need for stronger family care were homeless children and children in residential care institutions. Again, that's really just orphanages. So before rolling out the programs associated with these new initiatives, the Cambodian government and partners wanted to get baseline data on the numbers and characteristics of these children so that they could better understand the scope of the problem, mobilize resources, and direct the response. A similar effort was also made to collect data on children in residential care, but today I'm focusing just on the homeless study. We worked with a large number of partners. This was very much a collaborative effort. So the study was co-led by the National Institute of Statistics, as well as Friends International, which is a local NGO. And there's a network of all local NGOs in Cambodia that work with homeless children called the Cambodia Street Child Network. And then MLT Consulting is a group of Cambodian researchers that were also very critical to the project's success. And we developed a technical working group that involved some other key stakeholders like the Ministry of Social Affairs and UNICEF, and met with them regularly so that they could also provide input on our approach and methodologies. So our methods for collecting data involve several different components. Because homeless children are a mobile population, sampling was one of the biggest challenges we faced, common to everyone here. We knew that we didn't really have the resources to count every homeless child in Cambodia, but we wanted to use a systematic approach. So first, in order to cover the main areas that were known to have homeless children in Cambodia, we selected administrative zones across 7 cities. And those were cities that people primarily in the NGO community told us were likely to contain most homeless children in Cambodia. And it pretty much mapped onto the 7 largest cities in Cambodia, with some exceptions of like border towns and towns with specific industries that might attract migrants. So within each area, we attempted to count all homeless children of all ages by working with outreach workers from the local NGOs in the Cambodian Street Child Network and mapping the hotspots where homeless children congregate. And then, this is key for 13 to 17-year-old children, we conducted a second independent count to enable a statistical estimation of the completeness of the first count based on the overlap between the first and the second count. So this technique is known as capture-recapture, and I'm going to explain it more in the coming slides. The reason that we applied this double count method only to the 13 to 17-year-old children was because the method requires collection of identifying information, such as children's names, and we had concerns that younger children wouldn't be able to adequately understand the informed consent to give this information. So we restricted the identifying information to older children. So this is an illustration of the capture-recapture concept. As I said, the method works by comparing the overlap between 2 independent counts of the same underlying population that are taken on 2 different days or 2 different occasions. So a good analogy to think about for people that aren't familiar with this is if you wanted to know how many fish are in a pond, fish are always moving around, you can't just count them. You might take a net and do 1 grab of fish in the pond on one day, tag those fish, release them back into the pond, and then the next day, take another grab of fish again and see how many fish in your second grab have the tag from the first day. So if the overlap between both counts is high, if you get a lot of tagged fish, then you know that the first count is close to the true total population. But if the overlap between the 2 counts is low, then we know that the first count is an underestimate and it needs to be adjusted using a mathematical formula that accounts for the low degree of overlap. So, instead of tagging children, we collected identifying information. The identifying information that we collected is shown here, and we used this to match children that we counted on both days. The matching was done using a computer program that checked for matches across both counts, and the program was able to detect phonetic similarities, so that even if a child's name was spelled differently between 2 days, we were still able to catch that, and it didn't require exact matches on every field. It was an algorithm. So, as I said earlier, again, we only collected this information on the older children for ethical reasons. We also developed a technique to avoid double counting children on the same day. So every child that we encountered was shown a picture of this cartoon, which, for those of you that can see it, it's a monkey and a chicken riding a bicycle. So the idea behind this was that this scene would be very memorable and unique. We did field test it. It was indeed both of those things. So then when we were doing the interviews, if a child, before we started the interview, we asked the children if they had to describe any cartoons they'd seen recently, or I don't remember exactly how we worded it. And if they were able to describe that they saw a picture of a monkey and a chicken riding a bicycle, we knew that that was us and that we shouldn't count them again. Defining homelessness was, of course, something that we struggled with a lot. For example, there are a lot of children in Cambodia who work on the street to earn income on a daily basis, and they're often mistakenly classified as street living, even though they actually sleep in a household. On the other hand, there are children that sleep in shelters that are made out of plastic tarps, who have kind of a permanent dwelling, and they might not self-identify as homeless, but are extremely vulnerable and don't have adequate housing. In the end, we decided that our inclusion criteria should focus on the place where children live rather than other characteristics like street working. So we therefore counted children who lived in public places and construction sites as homeless. We also counted children who live in dwellings that are less than 3.5 square meters of covered space per person, which is something that comes from humanitarian standards, so it wasn't just an arbitrary number that we pulled out of nowhere. And we ran all of these criteria through the NGO networks as well as the technical working group to make sure that there was consensus that these criteria made sense. So we faced a lot of decisions. This is an example of one of those tarp dwellings where this dwelling has been in that same place for many, many years, according to the outreach workers, but it's in an abandoned field. It's basically a drug den. We did count the children that lived in that setting, though again, if you just had phrased the question, are you homeless, those children might not have said yes. This is an example of a dwelling on a construction site. This was one that was, I think, really difficult for some of our data collectors to grasp at first, because most of the people that were living in construction sites in Cambodia came from rural areas, and they would temporarily be working on the construction site, but temporarily, for months at a time often. And the data collector said, oh, these aren't homeless people, they have a house in the countryside. It's, they're just here part-time. And we said, but right now, during the time that we're collecting data, this is a tarp dwelling, and therefore they should be counted. And I think everyone kind of was able to come around to see that rationale, but it wasn't intuitive for especially the outreach workers. This is another example in a slum. So we didn't count every slum dwelling in Cambodia. These other houses, well, by Western standards, the tin dwellings might not look great. I mean, it does meet basic needs, whereas the house that's circled here that's made out of tarps, we talked to the woman living there, and during the rainy season, she sleeps in her neighbors' houses. I mean, that's not an adequate dwelling. So if we saw a house like the one here, or if a child described their house in this manner, then we tried to count them. We probably did not capture all households that met this criteria, but we did try. So these are our findings from the capture-recapture of 13 to 17-year-olds. After adjustment, based on the degree of overlap between the two counts, we estimated a total of almost 2,700 13 to 17-year-old homeless children across all 7 cities. So this estimate, as you can see here, is based on a very low match rate in several cities, most of the cities, which led to high adjustment factors. Although the precision of the adjustment factors may be limited due to the small sample sizes, meaning like the large adjustment factors are driven just by a few matching children, these findings strongly suggest that the population of homeless children in Cambodia is significantly larger than the enumerators were able to document on either of the individual counts. So the implication is that data sources that rely on a single count likely underestimate the number of homeless children in Cambodia by a very large magnitude. And that's probably true in other settings as well. So regarding the overall characteristics of this is for children of all ages, the total number of homeless boys that was counted was significantly greater than girls. It's consistent with what, all data, there's always more homeless boys than girls, but what we saw was that that's especially true at older ages. So, we think that these gender differences are due to older girls getting involved in sex work, but we can't substantiate that claim from the data that we collected. So that would be an area for future research, to look at kind of the trajectories of girls. Regarding the interviews, we conducted very brief interviews with 13 to 17-year-olds, and I'm actually not going to go into detail here, but we saw that the children face a lot of hardships. We also saw that almost all of the children are living in family care. Like 85%, almost all of the children had some type of family care situation, but that did not stop them from being unable to achieve basic health security or education outcomes. So to recap, the key things that we found are that first, the method basically worked, meaning that we're able to collect data as planned. Second, the number of homeless adolescents in Cambodia is much, much, much greater than one would expect if relying on single count data. Third, I think the strict inclusion criteria drew attention to some new categories of children, such as children living on construction sites, and they could benefit from social services. That's an area that the NGOs are now targeting. Fourth, the gendered finding that the total number of boys counted was significantly greater than girls, especially in older ages. This suggests that homeless girls may face unique risks. Fifth and last, most homeless children live with family members, and they are still facing many hardships. I think I could go into the strengths and limitations. I'm kind of short on time, and these are kind of technical and methodological, but I'm happy to discuss them with anyone who is interested. In terms of the way that this data is now being used, there were limitations, but it is something that has been useful to the Family Care First initiative. So, like I said, the NGOs that we work with are starting to develop outreach programs for children living in construction sites. The data also reiterated the importance of providing family-based services, since the vast majority of children are living with families. And the National Institute of Statistics, who had really not done any work with homeless children previously, and was frankly a bit uncomfortable to be working with that population, they're now very interested in trying to expand their census to homeless children, which comes with all sorts of other challenges that everyone in this room is familiar with. But there is growing interest, so I think that was positive.
Thank you very much. So, questions of clarification before we open it up to a larger discussion. And I have one clarification. So the capture recapture covers what exposure period? So that, to what those, that 2,900 number is how many children exposed to homelessness over what period of time?
So the counts are children that were homeless at the time of data collection, and the counts were 1 day apart. One count was on a Friday, and the next count was Saturday. Yeah, so there could have, that's one of the assumptions that could have been violated. There are obviously children that might have moved outside of the capture area within a day, but probably not too many, especially because most children live in those kind of like permanent tent situations.
Right. So it's 1 day, basically.
Yeah,
1 day.
1 day.
Great, thank you. Other questions of clarification before we open it up to more broader discussion? Volker?
So the Census Authority also used capture recapture because it's 10 times as much if you have only one count, and the overlap is so minimal. It's really astonishing.
Right. I don't know. I mean, I think that this data makes a compelling case that they should. One advantage to the census is that they would have a lot more staff than we did. So if you truly were had enough staff to comb every street, perhaps you would have higher degrees of overlap, but I think that an argument could be made, even if you think that your coverage is high enough that you don't need capture recapture, at least the first time you try it, to do capture recapture, if only to confirm that it wasn't necessary.
And let me just ask one other question about the capture recapture. So in previous examples of capture recapture, we've heard that there's like a quota, that the researchers will go out and grab 100 one day and 100 another day, then look at the overlap and then do it. In this case, what were they instructed to do? Go find everyone they could in some given period of time in some specific area, and then that same instruction was repeated the very next day?
Yes, and it was different. It was different people doing the grab the second day, but they did work for the same organization, so we think that they were likely to gravitate towards the same places, which is...
We're counting every person they could in that place at a particular time. Okay, gotcha. Thank you. Very interesting. All right, so let's open it up to conversation and discussion. Once again, we have Isabel Lacalle, who presented about Chile, Frake, Spinwin, who presented about the Fianza estimates that they pulled together from various European sources, and then Beth Rubenstein with the Cambodian study. Any questions or discussion, suggestions? Yes?
Yeah, Beth, can we look forward to a methods paper out of that study?
Great, yes, Anthony.
There already is one, and I can provide you with the information. It's open source as well.
The methods paper. Was the question? I didn't quite hear the question.
Yes, the question was, is there a methods paper? So that this has been published in a peer-reviewed journal that's available open source, so you don't need any special university access to get it.
Anyone in the audience who's participated or done their own count that they might want to mention or reflect on? Just curious.
Hola. Para la joven de Colombia, García Colombia.
Chile.
Nosotros somos nuevos, yo soy Alberto Nervío de Nicaragua y recientemente hemos hecho también el conteo y tuvimos muchas dificultades con la identificación de si era de la calle y la vivienda en las cuales ellas habitaban. ¿Cómo resolvieron esa situación?
So we confuse people. So that we did have we tried to clearly decide on the inclusion and exclusion criteria for what constitutes housing, and then so a house had to have, if a house had 2 or more walls made out of plastic sheeting, and a child, so we would ask a child, what are your walls made out of? And if they said that they were made out of plastic sheeting, I think there was a clarifying question, how many of the walls are made out of plastic sheeting? And if it was 2 or more, we counted them as homeless. We counted, there was like so many variants, but you can actually rent housing by the day in Cambodia. We counted children that rented housing by the day as homeless, even if that house had 4 walls.
So I would just point out that last time we had a conference, there was a paper presented by Volker and Suzanne Fitzpatrick and myself that adopted the European typology of homelessness, which is known as ethos. And we what we basically did is thought about it in a larger global context. And it allows an enumerator such as yourself or Beth to distinguish which classes of homelessness they're going to include, and then to explicitly denote which numbers are associated with which class, which in part Isabel was able to her presentation explicitly mentioned which categories were included. So in other words, some communities can include people in tent type dwellings, and that's a specific category.
That's great.
As opposed to, you know what I mean, and which you could distinguish from people who weren't.
Yeah.
So, but just as a reference, yes.
Generally speaking, there is a discussion about the usefulness of this counting. For example, we have been told especially by Americans, that it's not very useful to make just a count, and you have to have really a list and to know each people by name, to be able to move in the fact that you change the situation. So I was wondering what was your experience about that, because counting people is taking energy and means. So, okay, it can be useful, but maybe it would be more useful to go directly to the next step, who will be to know each person by his name and his situation. What is your opinion about that?
Well, in Chile, the last census, the last cadastre of in 2011, now the budget of the government for homeless people is 10 times more than before. So it was a good thing to make the measurement. But maybe it's also, I think for the organization, it's so good to know the neighbor that you are working on. It's true that it costs time, money, but it's so good to know the people that you are working with. If you could change public policies, better, but yeah, but maybe we're obsessed with numbers, and it's better to obsess with histories of people.
It's not mutually exclusive. You can do the counting, but also be providing services and support. These counting efforts tend to be relatively marginal in cost, but may have great value, particularly done over time, as Volker gave that list of reasons why we would do a count in the previous session.
Yeah.
Did you want to say anything about that from the vantage point of EU?
No, but I think I should throw the question back, no, because I don't have any experience with it, but you're engaged in an endeavor to do that, so you must have reasons to believe it's useful to do it. It's certainly not mutually exclusive. The question also is whether, like if you do that, you have to be clear that it's not a count. And I think that's not always that clear. There is confusion at the end that what you have done is a count, and it's not actually a count. The other question is whether it's useful to try and get to know people by their name, and therefore more than by the name, but get to know people, whether a survey is actually the right thing to do that. But I don't have direct experience with it, but
That's would be yet a different thing, yeah. I was just going to say that the Eurostat question that you mentioned, the one thing that concerns me is that ever homeless, without any time constraint on it, is going to render it quite difficult to know what, it reduces its value. As opposed to like if you had turned it into two questions, in the last year, or secondly, in the last 5 years, or 3 years, or something like that, that would give you much more of a sense of what the current number is. But we have a question in the back.
It's actually a comment. So I was going to respond to the question about, we heard from Chicago, where I'm from, that we now have a by name list. But what I wanted to say about the counts and moving to a by name list is, for us, it was a journey, a long journey. We've been doing an annual count now for, I don't know, 20 years. It took us, and we've been doing a by name list for 2 years. So it was very much a journey, and the evolution of our work that led us in this direction. I'm not sure how that will translate in other countries, but for us, it was very much learning first of all from the counts of what was happening, and then how we would continue to progress to the point where we now have a by name list. And so that allows us, and that by name list, everybody on it has been very significantly assessed in terms of a whole variety of information, including health indicators and a variety of other things like that, and the type of housing that they should need. So I wanted to say that sometimes it's just a journey that you have to go on to move this forward. The other thing I want to say is we still do the counts, but we look for things differently now than we did. So with our veterans initiative, for instance, if we are on account and we identify someone who is a veteran and we don't know about them, then we immediately do an assessment with them to make sure that they move directly to our one list. So there's a variety of things that we've learned as we have gone on this journey. But one of the things that's really been interesting for me is that now that we have really good HMIS data, that what's been fascinating, because we never could say that these point-in-time counts were really accurate. We used the same methodology, we did it the same way, but we could never really have anything that said that we really, we know that this is an accurate number. It now compares incredibly well with our HMIS number. So we are almost identical to the number that we get from our point-in-time count to what's in our HMIS. So we do have some evidence now that the number's pretty good.
But can I just ask what you mean by the number is the same, but so that the sheltered count is the same?
And the street count.
But does your HMIS have a street count?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
I'll let my HMIS person answer
Okay.
that. Wait. I was going to.
So your HMIS is tracking unsheltered homelessness?
Correct, through our engagement with outreach workers.
Outreach services. Okay, so, and there's a daily count of outreach contacts?
They can, or they can maintain the contact if they continue.
Over time, right. But the outreach contact, the number of people outreached, I thought I heard you say 70%. It's about 70% of the people who are contacted?
Which are in outreach and which are in shelter?
No, of the unsheltered people, what proportion of them on your PIT count are people who are contacted by outreach on that day, that one night count?
Well, so we just had, the data I shared earlier was just for veterans. So we can see which number are veterans in sheltered and unsheltered, but we know our veterans count in HMIS closely approximates our PIT numbers too.
So almost 100% is what you're arguing of the unsheltered vets are getting contacted each day by outreach.
So I think that's where the challenge comes in, because for HMIS, we have the actual names, we know who they are.
Right.
For the PIT, we just have a number. So I think that's the strength of the by name list, is we can see who they are and how they travel between being sheltered and unsheltered, and their movement between outreach workers. We don't know that with the point-in-time counts.
Thank you. I'm Harry. I'm from Monash in Australia, but my research is actually based in Singapore. So I have a question, because I have this problem about counting, because it's illegal to sleep rough in Singapore. So recently we had a count, but that count is driven by the Catholic Church. And what happened immediately after the count was that the government went in to clear the areas of where these homeless people are sleeping. So my research currently is at ethnography, but I'm thinking of counting as well. I mean, moving forward, and I just want, just throwing it out there. What are some of the advice that you guys can give us? Because we work in a very precarious situation whereby sleeping rough is illegal and considered a crime.
I might just offer something on that, because one thing that did not come up in any of these presentations today, but which strikes me as a very feasible approach and strategy, is to do what is called a service-based methodology. What you do is you try to identify a service that the people who are experiencing homelessness are very likely to receive, which in the United States we would say would be emergency food programs at soup kitchens. Okay, so if you go to a soup kitchen and there's, you know, at any given day, 90% plus of the people who are homeless are going to a soup kitchen to get food. Okay, now they are not. Most of the people who go to the soup kitchen are not homeless, so there are other people there. But what you could do is you sample the people at the soup kitchen and you ask them, where did you sleep last night? And you can basically identify, first of all, did they sleep in a house or apartment? In which case you could stop asking the question. If they didn't, you say, did you sleep in a shelter or some other place? Then you can count what the shelter number is. And then the people who were in another place, you could say, you can determine which was sleeping rough or what have you, right, by a follow-up question. Then you have a ratio of unsheltered to sheltered, okay? And presumably you know the total number of people sheltered, because that's easy to count on a given night, the number of beds. And then you can extrapolate to get your unsheltered. It's just, it's a pretty simple approach, and it doesn't involve, you know, thousands of volunteers going around and doing all that. It's something that just a handful of people deployed to a couple of these service settings and just asking people, where did you sleep last night? It turns out I think it would be a very effective approach for a lot of these places. If you have something like that. Soup kitchens, I mean.
Coming back to the question of census or by name list, I would like to hear if we really need to do countings. I mean, if you can do I mean, for some countries or some places where they didn't do counting, maybe they can just skip that stage and go directly to the by name list. If people who are doing the by name list find that there is sufficiently advantages to do the by name list instead of the counting, because now we know that countings are, if they are done properly, they are probably accurate. So if you just need the numbers and you have a correct counting, it's enough to have, for example, your budget. But then the question is, what is the added value of the by name list? Because the by name list is a little bit more than just counting. It involves more sensitive issue. It's more, and in a city where you have countings, if you have to pass to the by name list, people are saying, we have already countings, why do you need a by name list? So that's an important...
They're very different purposes. The counting is done to enumerate. You don't have to talk to people. You don't have to wake them up. You don't have to disturb people or ask probing questions because you're not going to do anything. And so that's one purpose. Whereas a by name list, people are giving up their confidentiality and their privacy by giving you their name, which is a definite piece of proprietary information, and you know that's in exchange for their assumption that you're going to do something for them in exchange for their giving up their identity. So I think it's a very different social contract.
And you would be, in a country like Singapore, if you had their name, you would be able, there could be negative consequences to having their name. So like the information that we collected in Cambodia, the government doesn't have any of those names, and you wouldn't. There are definitely plenty of anecdotes about the police harassing homeless people in Cambodia, but our data would not give the police any information that would exacerbate that problem, whereas a by name list would.
I just wanted to...
In your case, you would only have names of 10% of the people counted.
And the names are like not, that's not in any government database, exactly, yeah.
I just wanted to quickly add, one of the things that have changed in Chicago, like Noni talked about our by name list, and I think there's two differences between our point in time count and the by name list. And the main thing is we've shifted from understanding the problem to solving it. Because with the by name list, you're gathering the information to prioritize people for housing in a consistent way that meets the needs of those experiencing homelessness. So the PID count is, obviously it's telling us the scope of the issue, but the by name list is allowing us to use our resources and actually house people.
Some people. And there are some people, you know, I don't think everyone agrees that quote unquote prioritizing is the appropriate province of some of these individuals. And certainly the United States Congress does not have, other than chronic homelessness, has not given any legal authority to communities to prioritize beyond that. However, people are using these made-up surveys to do that, and it's not clear that's actually legal, I would say. But anyway.
No, I don't want to argue against the by name. Do you call it by name list?
By name list.
By name list. But it's certainly not a requirement to solve homelessness. Like a country like Finland, for instance, has consistently been able to reduce homelessness, is about to solve it. There is still a core group left there, but I have not heard in Finland any talk about by name lists. I think there's ways to do data collection, extract policy relevant and service relevant information that you can use to improve your policies and continue to reduce homelessness. So I'm not saying that it's not useful to do it, but it's not a requirement to have effective policies and effective services.